On this Earth Day, the Environmental Protection Agency is also in the news, not for the successes and failures of its core mission, but for the actions of its leader, Scott Pruitt. Scott Pruitt had an apartment in D.C. for an incredibly low $50 a day. That apartment was owned by a lobbyist's wife. Now, there are records showing that the lobbyist, J. Stephen Hart, met with Pruitt last year. Both the EPA and Hart's firm previously denied any meetings during the time Pruitt rented the condo in 2017 or any time after. The firm now says the meeting was personal. Besides that possible conflict of interest, Pruitt's critics point to excessive spending on travel, furniture, security, and pay raises for aides, some now rescinded. The EPA chief, who was previously the elected Oklahoma Attorney General, came to Washington promising to roll back regulations, cut the agency's staff, and repeal Obama administration environmental policies. The New York Times reports this weekend that some of the behaviors Pruitt is in the spotlight for now were also happening during his time in public office in Oklahoma. Joining me now is New York Times investigative reporter Steve Eder, and you also reported with Hiroku Tabuchi on this story. First of all, tell us what you found.
We set out to try to get a better understanding of Scott Pruitt in Oklahoma and understand kind of what we're seeing now versus his years there. And our reporting ended up centering around, his ability to kind of blend to some extent his relationships that he had on the business side with political relationships, and brought it to a house during his years in the state Senate that he had purchased with a group of other investors through a shell company that was near the State House in Oklahoma City and in the state capitol. And we started looking at that. It turned out that it was a purchase that involved SBC, now AT&T, the telecom company. And just sort of raising the questions about kind of the blurring of the lines, that's gone on with Scott Pruitt over the years as it relates to ethical questions and business and politics.
And what about the transaction? Did he get a better deal on it? I mean, now we're talking about this $50 a day kind of situation in D.C. What was the situation in Oklahoma?
The lobbyist who had owned the home had bought it a year earlier. When Pruitt's group came in, they were able to buy it at a $100,000 discount from the purchase price a year earlier. It's a complicated sale.
Yeah.
AT&T's perspective on it, though, was that they had it appraised for a price that was similar to what Pruitt and his group paid at that time. But then again, a year later, Pruitt and his group sold the home. It actually, about 2 years later, sold the home for back up to the original price. So around that $475,000. So the numbers in there did raise some questions.
People are going to watch this and say, okay, why does it matter about a house that he had some stake in years and years ago? What is the pattern that you're trying to establish, and are the same people involved in any of the stuff that he's working on today?
Well, two parts of that are important to think about. One is that it's important to understand whether the issues that have arisen in 2017, 2018 stand alone, or whether they trend back to the time in Oklahoma, and that's definitely part of what we set out to try to understand. The person whose name was registered on this LLC that bought the home, is an individual who's a senior aide working closely with Pruitt now at the EPA. There's several different business dealings over the years where they were involved. And then the bank that ended up providing the mortgage on the property was headed by yet another, a person who now works at the EPA with Scott Pruitt as well.
So these were colleagues or business associates of him in Oklahoma at the time that facilitated this transaction, and now they are part of the EPA today.
Right. So there was a lot of connective tissue between these folks over the years.
Scott Pruitt has come in to say, I am the kind of deregulator-in-chief almost of the EPA, that these are my goals. Has he been effective? Because on the one hand, the environmental community says this is, disastrous. He's going to roll back clean water and clean power, clean air standards, et cetera. What's actually passed and what's happened?
Yeah, I think that what's going on, it's kind of interesting when you look at the agenda, that they've been effective to some extent in coming out with a high deregulatory agenda, a lot of specifics that have gone on over the past year and a half, or not quite a year and a half yet. But at the same time, these types of headlines on the ethics front and the questions that have arisen, suddenly you're also dealing with a myriad of other issues that could distract from that.
Well, what's the response been from Scott Pruitt or the office?
They said that this particular transaction that we were discussing was arm's length, was just a simple real estate deal, and nothing more to it, and that they hold themselves to a high standard.
All right, Steve Eder, the New York Times. Thanks so much.
Thank you.